Live. So good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. For those joining us for the first time, and we do have some kids joining us for the first time today, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And we are so excited because right now we've got 7 classes joining us from all across North America, literally like coast to coast. It's crazy. So I'm going to give them a chance to say hi before we dive in. So we've got Miss Lowe's, grade 1s in Mulvane in Kansas, joining us for the first time. Welcome in. Hey, awesome, guys. We've got Miss Carton's, grade 2s, 5s, and 6s in Anchorage in Alaska. Hi, everyone. Hey, and we've got dabbing. It only took 2 kids before we got it. We've got Miss Teason's, grade 4s in Surrey in British Columbia. Hi, guys. Wow, there's so many of you. It's crazy. All of BC showed up today. We've got Miss Buckley's grade 2s in Markham in Ontario. Hi, guys. Welcome in. Now, your mic's a little off, but we're waving. We'll say a big hello. Welcome in. We've got Miss Daly's grade 2s in Tucson in Arizona. Hi, guys. I wish I was in Arizona right now. Lucky you. We've got Miss Eamon's grade 1s in Overland Park in Kansas as well. It's just a Kansas-filled day today. Hi, guys. Welcome in. Hi. And last but not least, we are joined by Miss Deshane's grade 3s in Bristol in Connecticut. Welcome in, everybody. It's the most enthusiastic dinosaur kids of all time. All right, of course, the reason you guys are all here today is for our speaker. So we are joined live in Wembley, Alberta, in the Phillip J. Currie Dinosaur Museum by Education Coordinator Nick Carter, who's going to take us on a tour of the museum. We're going to learn a lot about dinosaurs, what they do at the museum, learn some cool things about fossils, and more. So without further ado, thank you so much for joining us today, Nick, and take it away.
Hey, it's good to be talking to everybody. So I'm Nick, and I work here at the Phillip J. Currie Dinosaur Museum in Wembley, Alberta, which is one of the more sort of dinosaur-rich parts of Canada. We're one of the western provinces, kind of on the way to Alaska, actually. So if you're heading up to that part of the States, you'll probably pass through this area. So to get started off, first I probably should get it out of the way. I'm in a great big sort of cavernous, echoey building, and the museum's open today, so there might be some reverberations and ambient noise, things like that. But hopefully we can all hear me and kind of tough through that. But what I wanted to talk about with everybody is the type of dinosaurs that we find here, and how we go about finding dinosaurs in this area. So the museum I work at is in Alberta. Now there's a lot of other paleontology facilities in Alberta, places that study dinosaurs. And ours is one of the newer ones, and we're not down in the big sort of arid badlands like you typically think of with finding dinosaurs. We're in an area that has a lot of farms and forestry, things like that. It's a very sort of woodsy kind of place. And we have dinosaurs here from rocks that are from near the end of the age of dinosaurs, from the Cretaceous period. But finding them is pretty hard because not a lot of rock from that time in the time of the dinosaurs is exposed here. So we kind of have to be pretty, diligent with where we go and, find everything we can. But the dinosaurs we find here are really interesting because people haven't been looking for dinosaurs here for very often or for very long. We've only started, about 50 or so years ago, which, might seem like a long time to you, but considering that in other places in North America, like down in the States or over in Europe, we've been looking for dinosaurs for over 100 years now. We're kind of trying to catch up with the game up here. But behind me, I've got the dinosaur that kind of sparks the hunt for fossils up in northwestern Alberta. This is a dinosaur here called Pachyrhinosaurus. Now, you might know Triceratops, the big horned dinosaur, sort of 2 horns over the eyes, 1 horn on the nose, and a big frill. Pachyrhinosaurus is a close relative of that one, but you can see it's got kind of a series of spikes on the middle of its head and kind of a crazy looking frill. And instead of horns, it's got these big lumps of bone over its nose and eyes that we call bosses. They would have been covered with a big flat horn when the animal was alive. Now, we find this species of Pachyrhinosaurus in this thing called a bone bed, and that's kind of like a dinosaur graveyard. So way out in the woods, there's a creek called Pipestone Creek. And one day it was actually a local school teacher was walking along the creek, and he found some bones from this animal and kind of tracked them from where they were eroding out of the side of the creek, and found not just one dinosaur, but lots of them. And we are still digging up dinosaurs there to this very day, although during the summer, because it's winter right now. I'm sure my friends in Alaska can appreciate what that's like. And yeah, we've been finding dozens and dozens of these things. We've got a herd that was at least hundreds, if not thousands, of dinosaurs in that herd when they were all sort of swept up, probably in a big flood together, and became buried and fossilized together. So not a very good day to be a Pachyrhinosaurus, but as paleontologists, we find it pretty cool. But it's not just this dinosaur that we find here. There's all sorts. And, if I wanted to show you every single dinosaur we have here, we'd pretty much be here all day. But I'll show you some of the kind of highlights of the museum. And then we'll head into the lab, and we'll get to look at some real fossils up close, some stuff that's been recently found. And then I'll take any questions anybody has.
Fantastic.
I've got you guys on a cart here, and I'll just kind of wheel us over to some of our other displays. You can see the sun shines through these great big windows behind me. It's a very open building. And here we are going to look at some other dinosaurs. I'll show you this one here first. So this is a plant-eating dinosaur like Pachyrhinosaurus, but it's a little bit different. It's a type of dinosaur called a hadrosaur, also known as the duck-billed dinosaurs. So a lot of these things had crests on their heads, generally made out of bone, and you might know some examples of duck bills. We've got lots from Alberta, things like Corythosaurus, Lambeosaurus, Edmontosaurus, the list goes on and on. This particular one behind me is called Hypacrosaurus, and it might not look very big to you, and that's because this one wasn't fully grown. It's kind of a teenager. So they would get really big, about the size of an elephant when they were alive. Now, what's interesting about this particular type of dinosaur is we find what might be Hypacrosaurus or something very similar to it in a different bone bed in the area that I've gone out to and dug out a few times. We haven't found a full, complete skull from this particular site yet, but it's something very similar to Hypacrosaurus, and the animals that are there were about the same age. Now, what's interesting about that is we've only got teenagers from this site. We don't have little babies. We don't have fully grown ones. So what we think is that this duck-billed dinosaur site was a bunch of young adults who had grown up old enough that they could leave their parents, and they formed their own little gang, their own little herd together, something that we call a bachelor herd. And somehow they died and became fossilized together. So one thing that we're working on right now is figuring out exactly what happened at this site, and what kind of dinosaur is preserved here. And it tells us a lot about how dinosaurs changed the way they lived and what they behaved like throughout their lives. Sort of like you guys, one day you'll grow up and sort of move out on your own. Maybe you'll live with a bunch of friends, and then you'll kind of go off and start your own families potentially. So dinosaurs were kind of like that in a way. But I'll wheel you down here, and you'll see duck-billed dinosaur skulls came in all shapes and sizes. We've got crested ones here like this Corythosaurus. We've got great big long flat ones here like Edmontosaurus. And recently in this area, we found some duck-billed dinosaur skulls. Now, we aren't quite sure what they are yet because the discoveries are very new, but we might expect some new species coming out of this area. The rocks around here are really poorly studied up until now, so there's a lot of potential to find new things. Now, obviously, where there's great big plant-eating dinosaurs like duckbills and Pachyrhinosauruses, there's going to be great big meat-eating dinosaurs to sort of take advantage of all that food. So I'll wheel you over here, and you'll be able to get a look at our resident meat eater. I'll just position it just like this. Hopefully everybody can see it, and I'll try to get out of the way as best I can.
That's perfect.
So this animal behind me is called Gorgosaurus. So Gorgosaurus is a close relative of, well, sort of a close-ish relative of Tyrannosaurus, T-Rex. Now, it was a bit different in some ways. It wasn't as big as T-Rex. It's still a big animal, but you know, T-Rex was huge. So it doesn't look quite so big by comparison. But you might be able to see it's got really long legs, and it's kind of lightly built. It's skinnier than T-Rex. So all that means that it was really, really good at running fast. And that's probably how it caught its prey, by chasing it down instead of surprising it like T-Rex might have. But you can see it's got a mouthful of really sharp teeth. I'll see if I can bring you closer to the jaws there. So yeah, really powerful bite, big eyes, really good sense of smell. So tyrannosaurs could definitely see you. Even if you weren't moving, they could definitely smell you very well. So they were really good hunters. And you'll notice those arms, they're really small. And everybody always wonders what's up with the you know, dinky little arms on tyrannosaurs. And really, they didn't use them for much, if anything, because they didn't need to. Everything that, you know, they did, the way they interacted with the world was mostly done through their mouth, and their jaws were their main sort of prey catching device. So, you know, if you're going to be really big and have a great big head and run around on two legs, you really don't need great big arms if your teeth do all the work for you. And speaking of teeth, for tyrannosaurs, it's really all we found in this corner of Alberta. Tyrannosaurs are not uncommon in other parts of Alberta. We've got Gorgosaurus from the Badlands down south. Its close relative, Albertosaurus, obviously named after the province. Another type of dinosaur, a few other types of dinosaurs, one called Daspletosaurus. There's also one that was recently just named called Thanatothuristes, which means the reaper of death. So tyrannosaur names are always very dramatic. And we've got a couple examples of Tyrannosaurus rex itself from Alberta. Up in this part of the province, so far we've only found teeth, so we can't say for sure what exact tyrannosaur we've got, though we're still looking for more bones and things like that. But if it wasn't Gorgosaurus or Albertosaurus themselves, which it probably was, then it was something very similar to them, would have looked a lot like this. So what I'll do now is I'll wheel everybody into the laboratory and show you some, you know, real dinosaur bones up close, and talk about how we sort of dig them up and, you know, make them look presentable.
Very cool. So this is a part of the museum that people, if they came to the museum, wouldn't get to just walk into, correct?
Yeah, exactly. This is kind of one of the benefits of working in a dinosaur museum. You get to go behind the scenes into all sorts of cool places, and most people don't get to go into this room I'm going to take you in. So this is a pretty special little moment here. You might see some paleontologists at work, or some lab volunteers doing their thing in here. So scan us in, and I'll just wheel us.
I like the bumpiness of the cart. It makes it feel like we're on an expedition together.
Yeah, a little bit in Jurassic Park, I guess. Really bumpy ride there. Okay, so I'll turn everybody this way. Okay, very low tech, but that's how we roll. So I'll pick you up, and so you can see this thing right here. What we've got is a skull of a Pachyrhinosaurus, a real skull. So what we're looking at here is, back us up a little bit. Now this one was, try not to make everybody motion sick here. This skull was found about 5 years ago or so, pretty close to the museum. And it's not quite complete. We're missing part of the frill, but this is where the eye socket would be. This is the nose, the beak, upper jaw. So it's more or less complete. Lower jaw's missing, but you know, all the really interesting parts are still here. I'll take you over to this thingamabob right here. Now this might just look like a big thing of rock, and it kind of is, but there's actually a whole dinosaur hip in here, kind of, you know, near the end of where the tail and the legs sort of meet up. And I actually helped collect this last summer from along a river in the area. It was really, really hard work. You kind of have to go down a forested hill and then, you know, collect the thing and then drag it back up. But right here are some backbones from a big plant-eating dinosaur, probably some kind of duck-billed dinosaur. And our paleontology technicians, the people who work on these things, have to chisel away all this rock that the bones are still encased in. So we couldn't take the bones out one by one. We had to take this huge hard block out and you know, then chip away at it bit by bit using tools kind of like this big sort of hand drill, and expose the bones underneath. So it takes a long time, and you have to have a lot of patience to do something like that, but you know, the bones aren't going anywhere. So you can take your time. It's better to do it right the first time than try to fix things afterwards. And take us just over here, and I'll show you guys some stuff, you know, that's been recently finished up by our paleontology team and our volunteers here. And a lot of it looks pretty good. So right here, this is a really interesting thing I've got. This is a brain case of a dinosaur from a Pachyrhinosaurus. So it's part of the skull, but this part kind of came out. But this is where its brain would sit. This big knob right here, this would be at the back of the skull. And this is sort of what connected the back of the skull to the neck bones. And then right here, this hole, the brain would sit right in there, and the spinal nerve, which would run through the backbones, would connect up into here to the brain. And then you can see all these other holes right here and here. This is where sort of nerves, kind of like the body's electrical system, would emerge out of the brain and spread all throughout the body so that the dinosaur could, you know, feel things. So that's what that is. And you can see it's, you know, it's a big brain case from a big dinosaur, but it's not very big on the inside. So, you know, despite the fact that this animal was about the size of a rhinoceros, brain wasn't all that big, but it didn't really need to be, as long as it could find food. Here I've got a backbone, a vertebra from a Pachyrhinosaurus. So this hole right here, the spinal nerve would go through that. This is the front side, sort of from the side. This big spine would kind of stick up. So this would be the top of the back. And then this is the back side. And it's missing these kind of projections that would come out from the sides. So when we find dinosaur bones, a lot of the time they're not totally complete. So we have to put the pieces back together as best we can, but we're sometimes missing the whole thing. So you can see there's all these cracks in here. Our lab volunteers had to sort of glue it back together, because being underground for about 73 million years, which is how old our dinosaurs here are, it can, you know, do a little bit of damage. And one last thing I'll show you is this thing right here. Now this is really cool. This is a section of the top of the frill of a Pachyrhinosaurus. So this little horn, well, it would turn into a horn as the animal grew, right here, would be sort of the middle. And then this projection right here would be a big spike that would be covered with horn. And this was sort of used by Pachyrhinosaurus to sort of show off to each other and say, kind of be sort of like this. It'd be like, look how big and tough I am. You wouldn't want to mess with me, or maybe you'd want to, you know, have baby Pachyrhinosaurus with me. So yeah, pretty cool, I think.
Fantastic.
All right. Is there anything else we should show off, or is it time for questions?
Well, why don't we dive in with questions? And if there's any question where it prompts something that you think that might be really cool to show to the kids, you can bring that up and go from there.
Yeah, sure.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Nick, for the tour of the behind the scenes and the galleries itself. In addition to our 7 classes live, we've got at least 8, possibly up to 15 watching on YouTube right now. So welcome in. Just let me know where you're joining from. Type in questions in the chat bar, and I'll take as many questions on YouTube as I can as well. But welcome in from Hawaii, Ohio, Connecticut, and more. It's really exciting having so many kids tune in. With that said, let's dive in with our live classes first. I want to go to Miss Lowe's group to kick us off with a question. If you guys have anything you want to ask about dinosaurs, about the museum, or anything Nick talked about, come on up.
Ready?
Yeah, you're good.
What is the strongest dinosaur?
The strongest dinosaur.
Strongest dinosaur. That's kind of a hard question to answer. And the reason is, we can't watch dinosaurs sort of doing their thing anymore. We can't sort of test them to see, how much weight they'd be able to pull or to carry. But we can guess that, the bigger the dinosaur generally, the bigger or the stronger its muscles were, and so it would be better at maybe lifting things or pulling things. But if you want to know the dinosaur with the strongest bite, we're pretty sure that was actually Tyrannosaurus Rex, based on the size of its jaw bones and kind of how they were shaped. Looks like it could exert a lot of force. So it was more of a bone crushing animal than, a meat chopping animal.
Yeah, super cool. Great question to kick us off, guys. All right, let's head to Alaska. If you guys have a question, bunch of classes there, come on up.
All right, give us just a sec. Second time around, we'll take someone from this crisis.
Perfect.
Oh, yeah. Do I say it?
Yeah, go ahead.
Human bones, like after like 1,000 years, like they disappear. Why don't dinosaurs do that?
Yeah, why don't dinosaur bones
What makes them so strong?
Yeah.
Sorry, what was that question? Why
don't dinosaur bones disappear? If human bones disappear after 1,000 years, why don't dinosaur bones disappear?
Well, human bones don't actually disappear over that long, depending on sort of, what sort of state they're left in. But we've found, well, not we personally, but archaeologists from all over the world have found human bones that are thousands and thousands of years old. People from, that were around during the Ice Age have been, had their skeletons or even more than that preserved in some areas, like on mountaintops or in bogs, caves, all sorts of stuff. So we can find, human bones that are pretty darn old.
Fantastic. Well, and so with dinosaur fossils, just a quick follow-up on that. Is it actual bone that we're holding when we hold a dinosaur fossil, or is it something else?
Well, here's what happens. Here, I'll grab a bone to illustrate this. So when this was, an actual bone, it would have been white like a regular bone was. But how a dinosaur bone turns into an actual fossil is it becomes buried, and usually very quickly, by very fine sediment, sort of like sand, little tiny minerals, and usually carried by water. And what happens is those tiny little sediments seep into the bone. There's little tiny microscopic spaces inside of bone, and sediments kind of fill it in. And some of the bone might sort of decompose, the more sort of organic bits of it, and that gets filled in by minerals. And so this is a process that we call permineralization, which is a very big, awkward word. But basically what happens is the bone sort of gets turned into rock that way, depending on the bone you're studying, what kind of environment it was discovered in. A fossil can be anywhere from about 50% or half bone and half rock to more like 90% rock and about 10% bone at best.
Very cool. I'm so glad we got that question and led into how fossilization happens. Super cool. Thank you so much. Let's head to Surrey. If you guys have a question, Miss Thiesen's class, come on up.
Why did you choose to pick up the bones?
Why did I choose to pick up the bones? Well, I chose to pick up the bones today to show them off to all you guys. But paleontologists, we go out and we dig them up so that we can study them and learn about dinosaurs, and so that the bones can be kept safe in places like this. We take really good care of the bones, and when we pick them up and show them to people, we do our best not to drop them or anything like that, although there's always glue and things like that that we can use in case accidents do happen.
Yeah, fantastic. I want to take a question from a YouTube class. So Miss Tremblay's class, joining us in Kapuskasing, Ontario, wanted to ask, what's the smallest dinosaur you found?
The smallest dinosaur, well, the smallest dinosaur we've ever found here, we haven't found a full one, but we found little bits of a dinosaur that was kind of about the size of a small ostrich in the area. So obviously, not all dinosaurs were really big. Some were pretty small. But rocks in Alberta, they do a really good job of fossilizing big dinosaurs. But rocks in other places, particularly China, do a really good job of fossilizing small dinosaurs, and scientists there have found ones that were, about the size of a robin, really tiny dinosaurs, and they were really common as well. And they probably lived around here too, but different kind of environment preserving the fossils. So we have a hard time finding things like that here.
Yeah, great answer. All right. Miss Buckley's class, I'll check in with you guys. I don't think your mic is still working. So I'm going to have you type in your question. I'll come and check and see if it happens to work by some fluke. Let's see. Can you guys talk to me, Miss Buckley's class? Let's see if I can hear you. Hey, so you're sort of there, but not enough probably to get through a question. So type in the question in the chat bar and I'll come back and I'll take it in 2 seconds, okay? But in the meantime, I'm going to head to Miss Daly's class, who's been typing in some questions. Miss Daly's group, if you guys want to come up for a question, instead of having to type it in, just demute your mic, because it's not letting me do that right now. And then we'll be good to go, and I'll take one from you guys. I'll let you know when you're all good. There you go. Perfect.
Do you have Stegosaurus?
Do we have Stegosaurus? No, we don't. And the reason is Stegosaurus didn't live up here. Our museum is really dedicated just to the dinosaurs that lived in this particular area of northwestern Alberta. And our rocks come from the late Cretaceous. Stegosaurus is, not to say it isn't a really cool dinosaur, because it is, and we have nothing against Stegosaurus, but it's only found earlier in the late Jurassic, so quite a few million years before our dinosaurs here. And it comes from places like Montana, Colorado, that sort of area, the western United States, south of Canada. So, our chances of finding a stegosaur up here are pretty slim, although, I certainly wouldn't mind.
Who knows? I always love highlighting to kids because I think people lump dinosaurs together as being, sort of a block. They all live at the same time. And we are closer to Tyrannosaurus. So humans live closer to when Tyrannosaurus lived than Tyrannosaurus did to Stegosaurus. So there's a bigger gap between those two than there is on the way to us, which I always love highlighting. Miss Buckley's class wanted to know, and this is a question that we've been getting on YouTube as well, how do you know where to find dinosaur bones?
Well, it's not quite as high tech as you might think it is. There isn't like a machine where you might have seen in movies like Jurassic Park where you can, blow some radar into the ground and see the fossils underneath or anything. What you have to do is you have to actually go to places where rock that was laid down in the time of the dinosaurs is exposed on the surface. And this happens due to erosion. So, the rock on top and everything on top of it gets eroded away, generally by water. And places where this kind of rock is found normally is places like Badlands that we have in Western North America. So that's basically where at the end of the Ice Age, all these glaciers melted away and sort of the age of mammals that was sort of sitting on top of the age of the dinosaurs kind of got swept away. And then we can go down into these areas. I kind of like to think of them as nature's giant potholes, basically. And go to these places where, Cretaceous rock, dinosaur age rock is exposed, kind of on the sides of these valleys. We have things like that around here. And then we just walk around with our eyes looking at the ground, and we hope to find, the shape or the texture of a fossil sticking out of the rock, and that's how we find dinosaurs.
Yeah, which is fantastic though. I mean, I love that with dinosaur and with paleontology, you can just be a person going out and exploring and find something that is unique to science. I mean, that is a really magical thing that doesn't exist in a lot of other sciences. So
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
hope. So kids, if you guys go to the right place and look around, you might find something very new to science.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you haven't got this question yet. So two groups on YouTube, Miss Erickson's group in Stafford Springs in Connecticut and Mr. Hancock's group in Georgetown in Ontario wanted to know, what did in the dinosaurs? How did they go extinct? What happened?
Well, a lot of people like to sort of talk about this as if it's some sort of big mystery or anything, but it actually isn't. We have a pretty good idea as to what caused the dinosaurs to go extinct. And here's what happened. About 66 million years ago, an asteroid or a meteor, whatever term you like, a giant rock from space smashed into Earth. And it hit really fast and really hard. Now, this wasn't, a rock, the size of a boulder. This was a rock about the size of a city. And we can tell that it hit the Earth in Mexico at the Yucatan Peninsula because we've got a crater that's the right age and the right size to have been caused by a meteor like that. And there were some sort of short-term effects and long-term effects from that. Short-term effects were, immediately there was this big explosion, and anything within that area was just kind of blown to smithereens, basically. It was kind of like setting off, a billion nuclear bombs all at once in one particular area. So pretty violent thing to happen. And what happened after that was all sorts of little microscopic dust and debris was blown into the atmosphere. And then a lot of that rained back down, but it became super hot. So it was like raining fire down on the animals all over the Earth. And on top of that, just the atmosphere became superheated. So that caused forest fires to erupt all over the world. And, in a lot of places like, North America during the summertime, and unfortunately what's really happened in Australia, we've seen that forest fires can be very destructive for wildlife. Then what happened after kind of all that died down was all this dust and stuff hanging in the atmosphere didn't just go away, and it blocked out the sun. So without enough sunlight, plants, especially trees, whatever trees that were left, couldn't get enough sunlight to make their own food, so they died out. And big plant-eating animals, particularly large dinosaurs, couldn't get enough to eat. They died out. The things that ate them, big meat-eating dinosaurs, they died out. So that is pretty much, near as we can tell, what happened. The bigger mystery is why all sorts of other animals, like birds, which are just one type of dinosaur, just ones that happen to survive, crocodiles, turtles, lizards, mammals, snakes, frogs, salamanders, all these other things that were around at the same time, how did they survive? That's the bigger question.
Yeah, fantastic. What a great, that was a fantastic summary of that, actually. Thanks, Nick. All right, I want to take questions from our two other live classes. We'll see if we can get a second round in two, but I'm going to go to Miss Siemens' class first. If you guys have one, come on up. Yep, you'll be good to go.
Go ahead and ask your question.
How many teeth did Velociraptor have?
Yeah.
Did Velociraptor have? You know what? Off the top of my head, I don't quite remember. And if I had a skull of a Velociraptor here, you could just count them, but that might take a long time, and we actually don't have one hanging around here. I would say it's around 50, 60 teeth, give or take. I encourage you to go look it up, though, in a book or on the internet, though, and see whether I'm right on that guess or not. But yeah, they had a lot of small, very sharp teeth in their jaws.
Very sharp teeth. I always like highlighting, too, for kids who might not know, if you've ever seen a Tyrannosaurus tooth, these are things that can get about the size of a banana. So imagine if you hold a banana in your hand, that's the size of the tooth, and there's a jaw full of them trying to eat you. That would not be a fun way to end your day. All right, let's go to Miss Deshane's class. If you guys want to come up, go for it.
Do you guys have any teeth that you guys can show us?
Yeah.
Have any teeth we could show you? You know what? We actually do. Let me just pop away for, it'll just be a couple seconds.
Yeah, take your time.
Tooth, okay? Hang tight.
Okay. Dun, 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 dun. This is what Jeopardy theme music's all about. Dun, 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 dun. I'm excited for some teeth. But yeah, great questions, guys, from all our classes, by the way. Really appreciate you guys getting so engaged. And when we're done this session too and Nick's back, I'll highlight ways you can learn more about the museum, more about dinosaurs, and some of our past fantastic sessions with some other paleontologists. So if you're keen to learn more, lots of opportunity out there. Let's see. Oh, Nick's back. Let's see what he's got.
Okay, so it's not the full tooth, but what I've got here is a Tyrannosaur tooth from the bone bed at Pipestone Creek, where we find all the Pachyrhinosauruses. So yeah, I mean, that's not a huge tooth, but it's not terribly small either. Came from something like Gorgosaurus itself. Now, what's interesting about this tooth is it's pretty much just the tip. It would be bigger than this, but what happened was the animal actually lost the tooth while it was eating. It broke. It was probably scavenging on Pachyrhinosaurus bones, and it just fell out of its jaw. But dinosaurs, they were kind of like sharks or crocodiles in that they could always grow a new one in to replace it. And another cool thing about this tooth, I don't know if it'll show up terribly well on my camera, but you might be able to see the tip is kind of dark here. And that's because the outer coating of the tooth has worn away, and it wore away because the animal was using it to chew on things. So it was an old, worn down tooth, probably close to breaking, and then when the dinosaur bit something, the tip of the tooth snapped off, but it just grew a new one in.
Super cool. Thanks so much, Nick. All right, Miss S's class, Stanko's grade 1 class in Ohio wanted to know, how do you get a job like yours? You got a cool gig. What do you do?
Well, I got pretty lucky in getting my job. The world of museums right now, it's not easy to get a job in this kind of place. So there's a few things you can do. Number one is just do really, really well in school, especially in science and math. But everything you learn in school is worth learning, although it might not seem, super useful or relevant at the time. The better you do in school, the better a chance you'll have of getting a job in this kind of thing. So then what you'll want to do is, after getting all your homework done and passing all your grades, you'll probably want to move on to university. And there's universities all over the world now that have courses in paleontology. There's some really great ones in Alberta, where I come from, but they're all over the world. And you'll want to study, paleontology, but not just that. Things like zoology, living animals, as well as geology, the study of rocks. And then what you'll want to do is just learn as much as you can. And volunteering is a really great way to get involved as well. You can volunteer at a university or your local museum, places like that, and just learn from experts. You might have to spend a lot of time helping them for free, but you'll get a lot of good experience and meet some really cool people. And if you do a really good job, they'll probably remember you next time they have a job opening. And then you pretty much have to be willing to kind of look around the world, see who's hiring, people to talk about dinosaurs or study dinosaurs or dig up dinosaurs, and just kind of go where they're asking for you. So you kind of have to be a bit adventurous, but you get to have a lot of fun.
Outstanding. Well, thank you so much for that, Nick. So we've got an inspired path for future paleontologists out there. We've got a few more minutes, guys. So what I think I'm going to do is take some questions at random from some of our live classes, a couple from YouTube, and we'll wrap up after that. So I'm going to head first to Alaska. I know there's a bunch of classes all joining there, so I want to give one of the other students from one of the other classes a chance to ask a question in Anchorage. Come on up, guys.
They come back around to us to ask questions. Oh, are you guys right now?
Yep, right now.
Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah.
No, wait. You wanted to ask a question, Giselle. Did you want to ask? What up?
Oh.
Hi.
What was that school next to the one you showed us before?
What was sorry?
What was the school that you showed us before that was huge? What was the other one next to it?
Yeah.
Oh, the other one next to it. Here, I'll come show you. The one next to it is also a Pachyrhinosaurus, but it's not a sort of real skull. Hopefully you can all see that right here. I'll try and adjust things right here. So this skull is it's hollow. It's a cast. So you can see that's kind of what a Pachyrhinosaurus skull would look like. There's its eye, there's its nose, big nasal boss, big frill back here. But yeah, it's a cast. It's an exact copy of a Pachyrhinosaurus skull. And you'll often see that in museums. You know, when you are seeing skeletons sort of mounted in displays where they're all put together, we make copies of the bones and we put those on display because it's just safer and it's easier. You know, sometimes things get broken or, you know, what have you out there. And so using a cast, which is, you know, looks identical to the real thing, is a good way of keeping the actual fossils safe in places like labs like this, and so paleontologists can continue to study them. Incidentally, up in Alaska, you have your own type of Pachyrhinosaurus up there as well, up from northern Alaska. It's called Pachyrhinosaurus paritorum, so something for you to look up after this.
Super cool. All right, we're gonna go to Miss Thiesen's class. Do you guys have one? Come on up.
Do we have a question, anybody?
Everyone has a question.
Feel? Do they have fear? Oh, do dinosaurs fear anything?
Yeah.
Dinosaurs fear anything? Well, we can probably assume that they were, you know, afraid of being eaten. Most animals, you know, if we watch them today, seem to be afraid of, you know, getting hurt, being eaten, that sort of thing. Whether they, you know, experience those kind of emotions like fear the same way that we do, we can't say for sure. I like to think they do. And we have to assume that dinosaurs did as well. To what degree, we can't tell. We can't go back and see them. But you know, things like birds nowadays, which are a type of living dinosaur, you know, they get scared off by predators and things like that. So there you go.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, one last question from our groups. Ms. Daly's class asked this in the chat bar. A few other YouTube groups did as well. How do you know what dinosaur it is from just the bones? And how do you put these bones together to make a full dinosaur?
Well, it can be tricky, that's for sure. And with a lot of the fossils that we're finding in this area, we can at least narrow it down to the family of dinosaurs. I'll give you kind of an example here. I'll use this one. This is a lower jaw from a Pachyrhinosaurus. So what you're looking at here is the inside. These slots are where its teeth used to be. Now, if you find a lower jawbone that has these slots where teeth would basically be stacked one on top of the other, what that means is you've got some kind of big plant-eating dinosaur, probably either a duckbill or a horned dinosaur. So you can sort of narrow it down that way. It's not a big meat eater. Other parts of dinosaurs, you know, the backbones, the limb bones, things like that, they will look pretty similar depending on what family of dinosaur you've got. You can tell if it's a meat-eating dinosaur or a theropod dinosaur because the bones inside will be hollow, whereas in large plant-eating dinosaurs, they'll generally be solid on the inside. The best way to narrow it down to the exact species you've got is to have a skull, especially a complete skull, because that's where a lot of the distinguishing features are. But kind of where we're at a disadvantage in some of our bone beds, like the duckbill dinosaur bone bed I was telling you about earlier, is we don't have a complete skull from there yet. Mostly just stuff from the neck down. So we can tell from the shape of it that it is from a duckbill dinosaur, but what type, we're not too sure. What's really nice though is when you find a dinosaur skeleton where all the bones are still in the positions they were when the dinosaur was still alive. It's called finding an articulated skeleton. It doesn't happen all the time. It's, you know, not terribly common, but when you find that you know, a dinosaur that's all put together and kind of complete from nose to tail, you know what all the bones in the skeleton look like. You can tell what dinosaur it is, and then if you find something that's a bit mysterious, you can compare the bones that you find from that one to a complete specimen, and that'll help you narrow it down that way as well.
Cool. Nick, this has been fantastic. I know we could go all day with all these questions, and we got so many classes tuning in live. But before we wrap up, is there anywhere we can guide kids to learn more about your museum, more about dinosaurs in general that you'd personally recommend? Where can we send them to keep the learning going?
Well, if you want to learn more about our museum in general, we've got a website. It's dinomuseum.ca. So nothing terribly complicated or anything like that. I actually write a blog for the museum on the website. So if anybody wants to check that out, you can learn more about general dinosaur facts and things like that on there. As far as where else to go to learn about dinosaurs, your best options can be on the internet, as well as books. So there's lots of great books out there for kids and adults of all ages. You want to look for stuff that's pretty new, because paleontology is always changing, updating. So look for the newest, coolest looking stuff you can find. But don't believe everything you see in movies or things like that. While the new dinosaur themed movie might look pretty cool, it's probably not very accurate as to what dinosaurs actually looked like. So reading books written by experts, paleontologists, is a good way of doing it. And if you've got a local dinosaur museum, go check that out. You can see if you can reach out to your local paleontologist, see if they'll tell you anything. And by the way, if anybody at the end of this still has questions that they're really dying to answer, you can send me an email. I'll respond back to you and answer all your dinosaur questions. My email is ncarter@dinomuseum.ca. So feel free to send me a query, and I'll try and answer it as best I can.
Thank you so much, Nick. So we'll pass along all those resources in an email at the end, as well as Nick's email. So if you have more questions, and I think you all do, just inundate him. Like, send him so many that he never says that ever again, because we want to just drown him in dinosaur questions, keep the learning going. Thanks so much for that. We always appreciate when speakers can do that. So Nick, at the end of every session, what we do is I'm going to demute everyone's microphones. And so boys and girls in all our classes, if you guys could get ready to join me and say a huge thank you to Nick for joining us today. You are all now demuted. Go for it. Thank you so much. No, chaos, that's all right. Thank you so much to all our classes for joining today. We really appreciate you being here, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Nick, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
All right, have a